English as a Second Language class. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull that up on the screen and show you the video that you saw on the thumbnail. I'm sorry, the picture you saw on the thumbnail, and that is of Connie Warner using lava lamps to be able to teach English to her Portuguese students. And I think that's really cool. I think that's very out of the box. And she was able to speak all in English, and her students were able to understand and comprehend that, and to do an activity that's just different. And if you look at this picture, you don't see anything about, you could say like these grammar books or these big textbooks or something like that. You just see people that are able to do a very interesting activity, a real world activity. And I think that this is a stepping stone for these students to be able to use English in the real world. And that resonates with me because my name is Franklin, and I seek to inspire and motivate people to complete their first 1,000 hours of their language learning marathon. And I share an out-of-the-box mentality to help people learn languages on their own in a real world setting. And I think this is going to be a video that will really resonate with the first 1,000-hour community for several different reasons. Okay, let's go into those reasons. One of them is people who like to learn about various language learning strategies will potentially like this video because it will help them potentially improve their own self-study. So this is one of the reasons why this is a good video to watch. I remember when I was on my Duolingo journey and I was seeking to try to figure out how can I learn Spanish more effectively. I looked at different language learning strategies, and I found something that would actually take me from a beginner level to a more advanced level. And also I think this is good for people to look at as well, because sometimes as adult language learners, we might have the frame of reference of learning languages only from what we have learned in high school or college, but there are other ways to learn a language that maybe we have not explored or known about, or even if we do know about them, it might be good to still think about them or go in and explore the topic a little bit more deeply so that we can actually pick out things that we might like to use in our own self-study. Okay, so let's go on to another point here. This will also be helpful for parents who want to find suitable teachers to help their children learn a foreign language. And like I want to say more and more here at First 1,000 Hours, you can be a beginner, but you still can have an advanced mindset or an advanced strategy. And what I mean by that is that instead of people coming with their own set curriculum, if you have an idea of what you want in a bilingual curriculum or something like that, you can actually be able to apply that. You can actually say, okay, well, I know about Connie's 4 rules of ESL that we'll talk about a little bit later on in this presentation, and this is how I want the class structured, or I want to maybe choose a teacher that is very relatable, like we'll talk about in a little bit as well, and that will be the best teacher for my child. Or there's different things that you might like that you might see as we go into this presentation. And then also this video will be good for teachers who want to teach English as a second language more effectively. Connie is someone that like I said, is like, she likes to do out of the box things, and so this is not going to be, I would say, like a standard ESL video presentation. And in fact, when Connie was trying to look at material online, examples of how classes use ESL, or English as a second language, she was looking at examples of classes that try to teach English as a second language, and she was kind of disappointed sometimes with the material that was out there because it didn't implement the 4 rules that we're going to be talking about. So let's continue with this presentation. Okay, so who is Connie Warner? Connie Warner is my motivational partner, and what I mean by that is that we both encourage each other to learn languages. We talk about, we've been talking with each other for like 2 years on language learning theory, language learning strategies, our own progress, and the different languages that we have sought to learn. and then we're excited for each other in our language learning journeys. And then also we have talked about different language learning projects that we have been working on as well. So one of the projects that Connie is doing currently right now that we're talking about is she is seeking to teach English, or she is seeking to, but she is teaching English as a second language. And then also, so she shared a lot of things with me, and actually I have to title this part 1 because there's so much to talk about that I will not be able to cover everything in this video. And then also, I get to share with her about first 1,000 hours and things like that. And she is someone that said to me at one point, Franklin, why don't you do a language learning blog? And that actually got my wheels spinning to actually, I thought, do a podcast, which is what I wanted to do for first 1,000 hours, but also a YouTube channel. But then it turned into this YouTube journey. And so Connie was a big influence on that. So she encourages me in my language learning journey. Also, let's go ahead, and she is a native English speaker that learned Portuguese on her own in adulthood, and she is learning German as well. And so there's a lot of people that say a lot of different things about they've learned a language. And so I like to talk about first 1,000 hours because I like to kind of give some type of definition of what does it mean to learn a language. And so I've tried to make that definition 1,000 hours. And I'll show you about the level of intensity that she's had as we go into the next point. She got up to her first 1,000 hours with Portuguese approximately somewhere in her second year of learning it. And she spent approximately 2,190 hours learning Portuguese before going on a short trip to Brazil with her husband. And she's been learning Portuguese for approximately 3.5 years. Now, it's very interesting to look at those different numbers because what I do is I recommend that people get up to their first 1,000 hours in 3.2 years or less. Now, I recommend that people spend at least 1 hour, 6 days a week with their target language that they're trying to learn. And so that would take them approximately 3.2 years. And so, but Connie got up there somewhere in her second year, probably the beginning of her second year. And then I forgot exactly how long it took her to get up to 2,190 years. I'm sorry, 2,190 hours. I believe it took her around 2 to 2.5 years. But that is very impressive. That's a serious level of dedication. And if you want to know more about part of that story of how Connie learned Portuguese, then I'm going to put a card up here that you can go ahead and click. And this will allow you to go to a video called Do I Need to Travel Abroad to Learn a Foreign Language? And you should look at part 1 and part 2. Halfway in part 1, I talk about how Connie did this out-of-the-box thing to help her learn Portuguese. And then in part 2, I talk about her experience in Brazil after spending those 2,190 hours in the United States seeking to learn Portuguese. All right, let's continue here. Now, she got up to the level where she does simultaneous translations of Portuguese into English in a 2-hour service of one of the Portuguese churches she attends. Now, as I've looked at some of the recommendations, or I've looked at one of the recommendations of people that do simultaneous translations, they ask for people to spend like 30 minutes max at doing those simultaneous translations, and then then they need to give themselves a break or something like that. But Connie is doing this for 2 hours. She is listening to people speak in Portuguese, and then she's translating it into English. Now, when I think about translation, I typically think of someone speaking in a foreign language, pausing, and then someone else translating that. But there's no pausing with Connie's translations that she's doing. So she's definitely gotten up to a high level in Portuguese. And then also she's been a bridesmaid in a Portuguese wedding. You might wonder, why am I talking about that? Why am I talking about the fact that she was a bridesmaid in a Portuguese wedding? But I think that this illustrates that she is someone that has integrated with the Brazilian culture, to the point where she was asked to be a bridesmaid in a Portuguese wedding. And I wonder how many people have been so serious about learning a foreign language and integrating with the culture of that language that they are asked to be like a bridesmaid or a groomsman or something like that in a wedding. But that's what has happened to Connie. And then she's also is a volunteer bilingual English as a second language teacher at a Portuguese church. And she's committed, sorry, have a little error in there, but she's committed to helping with 26 classes and even does tutoring on the side. And I forgot exactly how many classes Connie has done at this point, but it probably is around like maybe 7 or 8 classes. And she's just committed to be with these classes in the long term, for the long term. Another point about Connie is that she is an avid reader and researcher on language learning theory. So, for instance, when she has been doing these volunteer classes, ESL classes, she likes to read a lot. So she has actually bought a book, and she probably read most of that book, or most, if not all of the book. She reads blog posts, she looks at videos, whatever she can get her hands on, she tries to read and to just grow and expand so that she can give her best for her class. And so I like that fact and that side about her. And I just want to say hello to someone who is watching the live stream. And I want to let you know that I haven't forgotten about you. I'm doing a lot on this live stream, but I want to let you know that if you have any questions about this presentation, I will try to answer them at the end. Okay, so I definitely just don't want to talk to the camera. I actually want to talk to people that might have any type of question. Right now, I can't exactly all the time see what you are saying in the live chat as I do this presentation, but you know, I'm just trying to do the best I can with the equipment I have at this point. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue. Now, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this right now. And again, like I said, this is part 1. So I won't be able to cover everything I want to today, but Connie Warner is, Connie Warner is a bilingual English as a second language teacher, and that matters. So before I even get into the depth of some of the classroom examples that I really like and that resonate with me, I want to talk about Connie being a bilingual English as a second language teacher. If you can look at this picture right here, it says ESL Portuguese beginner, and Connie really wanted to show that to me because she didn't put that up on the in the basement where she's she has her class in this church that she attends, but she really wanted to put that picture up there because someone, at least it seems like someone, felt that she was just doing such a good job apparently that they really wanted to point out that this is something for Portuguese beginners. And that was basically what her target is for her class. And, so it shows that it's not just about English that she's teaching, but she's also been able to relate to people that speak Portuguese because she is a bilingual teacher. All right, let's continue. Now, what I'm going to be sharing with you are some of the many WhatsApps that Connie has shared with me about her ESL experience. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read these. It says, when I started my little class, I chatted a bit in Portuguese and asked everyone how much English they could speak, etc. Little chit chat. People seemed to relax right away. That is a very big point because I know that even one of the concepts of First 1,000 Hours is most of the time am speaking in my native language, which is English, to inspire and motivate you to learn whatever language you're learning. Now, I have a emphasis, you could say, on Spanish, but I know that a lot of the principles that I talk about can be applied in other languages. And I know that there are a lot of English-speaking people or people that know English that are watching my channel because I can see how many people watch the videos that I put out with English subtitles. And for the majority of people, you're not watching them with subtitles, and so you know something about English. And I would like to be in a class where I could feel as comfortable as possible, because when you're learning a foreign language, it's going to be easier for you to understand something foreign if you can just relax a bit. And so she was able to use the tool that she has, being bilingual, to help calm people and show that they can make it through the class because their teacher understands them. And we'll look at that even more. She said this: never underestimate the power of a person's native language. If they are upset, worried, nervous, hearing their own language puts them at ease immediately. I was just looking for articles about ESL teachers being monolingual. There's a whole lot of trying to justify their lack of interest in learning a language themselves. And now I live in America, and I have been a proud monolingual, and I believe that we are in a country of proud monolinguals. We like English and English only to the exclusion of everything else. And I think that can affect the way that we teach, because if we have not understood the struggle of seeking to learn a language in adulthood, or even seeking to learn a language even in childhood, then it's harder for us to relate, and then it's harder for us to identify ways in which ESL classes can be more helpful. And so, Connie, though, has gone through a struggle. I have gone through a struggle with Spanish, and I'm still, I'm not saying I'm as high as Connie is in Portuguese, but I'm at a pretty good level in Spanish, I can say right now, to be very honest. And because I identify pain points that people have had in language learning, I can help them with those in a way that people that have not had that experience cannot do. Okay, so let's continue here. She said, even if you don't speak Russian, for example, but you took the time and effort to learn Spanish, you can instantly put yourself in their shoes and understand what the student is feeling and thinking. Stephen Krashen, now he's someone that talks a lot about language learning theory, and he talked about this theory called the input hypothesis. And so there are things in that theory that I really like. And he says that there should be zero stress and tension in the language learning classroom. And I just want to go back to just talking for a second about Connie and doing those lava lamps, and helping her students do lava lamps in her English as a second language classroom. I think the more that you can focus on something that you're interested in, like making the lava lamps, and less on the intricacies of the language, that's when you're really learning even more. And so, this idea of reducing the tension in the class is something that is really, really helpful. And I just want to say again, if you are in the live stream, I don't see how many people are there right now, but I will be answering questions about this presentation at the end of the live stream. So go ahead and ask your questions, and I will respond to them at the end. Okay, so let's continue here. Connie said this. She said that she told one of her students, okay, and I'm sorry, I messed up the wording a little bit, but Connie told one of her students about her language partner, and he would talk Portuguese at her for an hour at a time on Skype. And she said, I wouldn't understand a thing. One night I understood 2 words, speak and write. He was asking me to write a word in Portuguese, then speak it. He wrote to me in Portuguese that I was already beginning to understand him. I was so proud and excited that I understood 2 words. So you have Connie speaking for a whole hour, and all she was able to understand from her language partner was 2 words. And sometimes we forget the struggle. We forget the fact that it is difficult, or it can be very difficult, to comprehend someone that's speaking a mile a minute. And if we don't understand that, then maybe all the student will get after spending, an hour in an English as a second language class is 2 words or less. And we don't want to have that experience as students, and we definitely don't want to do that if we are seeking to help someone learn a language as well. Okay, so we need to identify with people. She said, I didn't think that I just missed thousands of others, thousands of other words. Just 2 words, and I was happy. We went back to class, and I told everyone this story. They thought it was pretty funny, but hopefully it will make them think, and I hope it made them think as well. So this is a picture right here of Connie with her Brazilian friends. And on the left is her language partner that she's been talking to for a long time, several years. And he was in the United States to visit Connie and just to spend some time in the United States. And then the person who has like the woman who has the black hair, that's another one of her friends, Connie's friends in the United States. That's Brazilian. And then you have Connie with the blonde hair on the right pictured. And again, this is just showing that she just likes to spend time with Brazilians and just integrate in the culture. So she is definitely serious about reading and listening to things in Portuguese, and also watching things in Portuguese. But at the same time, she is spending a lot of time with the culture, with the people, and if that is in person, like at the Portuguese churches she goes to, if that even means being on Skype with her language partner, whatever she needs to do to get more contact with the language, she is doing that. And so that's what I wanted to show you as well, as we are looking at someone who is relatable. So someone that's relatable doing this English as a second language class. Okay, so I want to also talk a little bit more of her and her experience trying to solve the language learning puzzle. This is what she shared with me. I remember when we were both kind of at that lowish intermediate stage. You would watch your Spanish videos on a topic you like, and then you would tell me about what they said. You had an extra layer of enthusiasm than you would have had in English, because understanding a new language is like the same as when you finish solving a puzzle. It is that extra layer of feeling of accomplishment. It was the same for me. I'd solve my Portuguese puzzle, then I'd tell people the message, and they'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, why are you so excited? Laughing out loud. So I forgot, when she was telling me this, I kind of forgot some of the times when I would tell Connie something like, oh, Connie, I understand 5%, or, oh yeah, this time it's like 10%. I understand 10% of what I'm hearing in Spanish, or whoa, I understand 15%, or maybe even 20%. That was a big deal for myself. And can you imagine someone that maybe doesn't even have even that type of comprehension coming into an English as a second language class, and from day one, they're trying to not only understand things where they might have a comprehension level of just 2 words in 1 hour or less, and on top of that, now they have to actually speak. It's crazy. There is a lot that is involved in understanding things. When we're looking at a real world application, you have to understand so many different words before you're actually able to speak. And I think sometimes we do things in reverse, and we focus on the wrong things first. And I think, to be honest, speaking from day one is not a good strategy if you're trying to get to a high level in the language. It's better to comprehend from day one. And so that's kind of the viewpoint of first 1,000 hours. I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak, okay? But if you're going to get to a high level in what you're trying to do, we have 2 ears. God gave us 2 ears for a reason versus just having 1 mouth. And when we actually learned our first language, what we did is we had a lot of emphasis on listening and understanding before we ever said 1 word. All right, so let's continue. I want to talk to you about how Connie first felt about speaking in Portuguese. She said this: I was so nervous to speak. Every time I ventured out, I felt like I was jumping out of an airplane. Then eventually I would be able to say about 3 things: yes, no, true. Okay, and I wonder, how long did that take? Was that in the first day? I don't think so. My head was so filled up with understanding what they were saying, that was all I could do. Okay, just think about that. If that was all she could do at that point, after having at least some type of exposure with Portuguese, then again, if we have these people come into a beginner classroom, or even if you come into a beginner classroom, why are you asked to speak when your mind is being filled with so much of what other people are saying? Or I mean, why are you forced to speak? If you want to speak, that's fine, but why are you forced to speak from day one? That's what I really should ask. And also, she said, if I sent a Portuguese audio to my friend, I would go outside where no one could hear me and read my carefully worked out script. But now I'm talking in front of a class of native speakers. No problem. The secret was I kept getting comprehensible input for hours upon hours. Now, the cool thing about this is Connie understands her transformation. And that is important for a teacher to know, like, okay, yes, I was at that point where I could only understand 2 words. I was at that point where I could only speak 3 words. But now I am doing simultaneous translations at a church that I go to. Now I'm actually able to speak in front of native speakers and things like that. And one thing that is interesting is now she knows what really helped her, and that was the comprehensible input she got from reading things, listening things, and listening to things and watching things in Portuguese. And so now you see that there's this teacher that is able to share kind of how that person learned a language. So I think it's important to also kind of understand when you're choosing teachers, like, how did they learn the language? I'm not saying that if they learn the language a different way, then maybe you want to be taught. That necessarily means that they can't teach you, but it's important to at least assess that, because Connie's emphasis is in real world application. It's not into getting like a certificate or something like that. It's into actually using the language. And some people don't have that same mindset or mentality. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and continue here. She said something like, this type of class sounds like a nightmare. So what would that class be? We'll see what she said here. She said, I think being totally lost in a class where a foreign language is being spoken that you don't understand yet, but have to learn, sounds like a nightmare. And on top of that, if the teacher wants you to produce a foreign language to boot. And so one of the frustrations that Connie had was she was looking for these practical examples of English as a second language that could emphasize comprehension instead of just forcing students to speak, and she couldn't really find that. And so, there's a lot of students, I believe, going to these classes and just being zoned out, or maybe saying to themselves or others, I don't understand. And it's like, how's that effective? How's that effective? Just because you're hearing English doesn't, if it's not comprehensible, then what good is that for yourself when you're a beginner, especially? Okay, there's a point where you do need to put yourself in an environment where you might not understand everything, but from day one, you just really need to focus on, or a teacher needs to focus on having the student have the confidence that they actually are going to have the capacity to actually learn a language. But if it's so confusing from day one, then what's going to give that student the incentive to continue? All right, we're going to go ahead and go on here. So I want to now go to Connie's English as a second language rules. So this is the first one. Never force students to speak English, and especially not in front of the class. Now, I am right now speaking to you live, in public. I don't know how many people might watch this video, but it's getting easier and easier and easier to talk to you through talking to this camera, but it's not always easy. I know that there are people that their native language is English and they're afraid to speak maybe into this camera or into a camera. They're afraid to maybe talk about a debate or something like that in front of a class. And actually, we were looking at one of the English as a second language activities, and it was to debate about a topic. And I'm thinking, like, for real? Who wants to do that? Who wants to do that in a foreign language when they're seeking to learn the language? And they might be at a low level. I just don't know who might want to do that. So it's important to kind of let the students, gradually adjust to the language and be able to speak at their own pace. And you think about babies, babies speak at different times. Not every baby comes out obviously not babies don't come out the womb speaking, but it takes some babies longer than others to actually speak. But eventually they do speak after they have that time and that opportunity of having that comprehensible input. All right, let's go ahead and go to point number 2. Never correct students' efforts at speaking English. And you might wonder why do that? And I would have to just say it would be interesting for you, if you have that question, to go and look at Dr. Stephen Krashen's research on the effectiveness of correcting students' grammar as they're speaking. And I've looked at some of his talks. I've not really presented that yet on First 1,000 Hours, but I will definitely tell you that he has found that to be ineffective. The effective thing that he's found is when students have more exposure to comprehensible input or reading. Basically, he emphasizes like reading in the target language, and as you read in the target language, you are going to actually notice grammar patterns. You're going to actually notice more of how people say things. And even if you are watching something, like if you are watching Spanish YouTube videos, you are going to actually, if you watch a lot, I'm not talking about one video. I'm talking about actually taking this seriously and having a First 1,000 Hour mindset. But if you actually do things like that, you're going to notice patterns over time. And so you get to absorb grammar in a way that you're not going to be able to do if you're just focused on conscious acquisition of grammar. There's something that unconsciously happens, and that's why before we go to grammar school, when we are like a child, we have an understanding, or like before we take a grammar class, we have an understanding of grammar because we have had comprehensible input for such a long time. All right, so let's go on to point number 3. Never test before giving input first. Most ESL activities are just different versions of testing dressed up as games. So again, this goes back to Connie's disappointment with the fact that classes are not really emphasizing comprehension. And they might say that they are in the ESL community, but not really. It's not really the case in a majority of different times, at least based on her experience doing the research on looking at classroom strategies. And this is what point number 4 says. Never say anything in English that isn't made comprehensible somehow. Item, photo, drawing, gesture, translation, etc. And so in this part 1, we're not going to really go in depth or in detail about some of the Connie's classroom examples that I really like, that I want to share with you. But I can guarantee you we're going to take a detailed look at practical real-world examples, a lot more than just a lava lamp, that really illustrate how to actually put into practice these 4 rules. And so look for that in an upcoming video. So I believe, and I know this is the same belief as Connie, that words need to be in us before they come out of us. And I can illustrate that also by 2 Bible texts that I think illustrate this as well. One of them is Matthew 12 and verse 34. It says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what comes first? Is it the mouth speaking, or is it what is in the heart? And according to this text, it would be what is in the heart. And so what is the heart? Proverbs 23 and verse 7 says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. So basically that's saying that the mind is another word for heart. So out of the abundance of what is in the mind, the mouth speaks. So if we want to have effective speaking, then that means that we need to be able to put the words in us first. And then whatever we meditate on, whatever we focus on, is going to eventually come out in our mouth. And so, the crazy thing that happens a lot of times is we listen to something, maybe if we're starting a class, trying to learn a language, and we might listen to a teacher say something, and we might try to repeat what that teacher says, after the teacher says it maybe one time, and then we're discouraged and we're like, oh man, I'm not going to learn the language, and we get frustrated, and we might have self-doubt and different things like that. But we didn't really we haven't even put any time and effort in actually comprehending the language. It's going to take a lot more than just one time to listen to the language to really get to a high level in speaking. And so that's why, again, I like to emphasize 1,000 hours. Give yourself 1,000 hours first, and then your speaking is going to be better. If you're going to be serious about learning a language. Okay, so this is how, these are some things that Connie shares about how to encourage students. So the teacher needs to praise students profusely. Now think again about where Connie was saying that she listened to her language partner speak for 1 hour and she only understood 2 words. And then there was a time where she could only say like 3 words: yes, no, true. So having that in your mind, you just have to be excited, really excited, maybe even a little overly excited when someone is able to let you know that they understood what you said, or if they start saying something in English, get excited for them. We get excited for babies, or we get excited if a baby says like 1 word. If they say mama or dada or something like that, we start, people start calling people on the phone and say, oh, did you know my son just said this? And we get excited, not just because the baby said something. We get excited because we see the potential in that child. But now when it comes to adults, and then the adult says dada, we're like, oh, why didn't you say like 2 paragraphs? Why didn't you say like, why can't you have like this full-fledged conversation? Not realizing that that person's going to get there over time. But we are too hard on ourselves, I believe, as adult language learners, and sometimes we can be too hard on other people, especially because if we don't understand the process of language learning, if we have not actually become bilingual, we might just think that this is going to be an instant thing. But when we understand the journey and the process, then we can have a little bit more empathy for people when they say one thing, and we can encourage them. Because again, language learning is not just about going through a set curriculum or something like that. It's a lot to deal with something mental, and just having the belief that one day you can actually get to a high level in that language. And so I thank God that the Lord can help in that, and I claim the promise. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Let's go on to point number 2 here. The teacher needs to constantly restrain their English. Anything they say must be comprehensible. We kind of talked about that already. The student's trust built is a fragile thing. Sorry about this. I'm even having grammatical mistakes and things like that. But it says the student's trust built is a fragile thing, and any helpful correction must be avoided. So if you're going and trying to correct the student on all this, they might have, it might have been just a big thing for them to say like 1 word or even a sentence. And even if they mess up, it's a big thing for them to get to that point. We forget how big that is. And so grammar correction, not only is it ineffective, but then it can be discouraging. And you have to know that fluency and getting to a high level in the language is a process that might not it's not going to happen after a student says like 1 sentence. So just work on that comprehensible input. And then her 4th thing here is simple styled English should be encouraged, because that is the first step that will eventually lead to fluency. And Connie said, my Portuguese started with hours of stone silence. So that's important to remember. And I want to say that now it is time for question and answers. So I'm going to see if anybody has question and answers. And I'm looking at the live chat. Now I'm going to actually do one other thing that I didn't do before. I'm going to go to First 1,000 Hours, because I look at Streamlabs right now and I don't see that there is any comments or anything in the chat. But I'm going to go a different way and try to see if there's anybody saying anything, and make sure I don't miss out on any comments. Okay, so just bear with me a little bit. My computer is a little bit slow, but I am just trying to see the live chat. So I'm going to see if anybody has. Okay, I don't see any questions or comments. So, all right, I'm just going to continue to move on. I looked two ways this time. One time I missed out on comments. I don't want to do that. So let's go over here to to let you know about an upcoming video that I want to talk about, dealing with like part 2 with the English as a second language class. It's going to have practical classroom examples that I really like of how Connie has implemented her 4 English as a second language rules. It will also talk about her students' response to her teaching method. And then this is a big question, right? Because at the end of the day, people are going to wonder, like, okay, yes, comprehension is good, Franklin, but can people actually speak with this type of method? So we're going to look at whether or not her students ever spoke any English in Connie's class. And that's going to be important to say. Now, I should say one other thing here, that, talking about relatability, because Connie kind of knows the struggle and all of this of language learning, and when she goes into her class, I have, when she was even showing me how she does things in English as a second language, how she does like some of the things that I'm going to talk about in another part, in a part 2. She really looks at students' facial expressions to make sure that they comprehend what she's saying. She also is someone that will she will listen to see, like, okay, if someone is saying, like, I don't understand, she's paying attention to that. And she is very serious in telling her students, like, hey, if you don't understand what I'm saying, tell me. She will basically stop the class and make sure that her students will understand. And that's the type of teaching method, I believe, or the type of teaching that I think anybody would appreciate. And so that's what I wanted to illustrate. And I want to let you know as well that if you want to know a little bit more about how Connie has learned Portuguese, then you can go ahead and click this video right here, and this will let you know more about that. It will be, do I need to travel to a foreign language? Sorry, do I need to travel to learn a foreign language? Part 1 and 2 again. And then I will also put a video about the natural approach to learning a language, which you might find very helpful as well. And then another video will be the video that I will be talking about part 2 of Connie's English as a second language class. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a nice day.